and in some languages is 1, but in other languages it's -1. As you can see, it's -1 here. Generally, a better practice to test for the false value as 0, if possible. Not a big deal, but just saying. So those two used in conjunction can trap for a null value, and in this instance, just display the text string "no country" if none is found. Right? I think that's pretty good, and not a very far stretch from most of the things that we've done here today. I'll hold up there for a moment. Anybody, any questions on what I mentioned there so far? All right, let's talk about number 2, null display. This is a user-defined variable. And basically, we would set this variable in the load script to determine the value of an ODBC null value. So a little bit more specific here, for the ODBC connection, if the value over in the data source is null, basically we could say, hey, if that's the case, display the word null. Again, that's a text string, a little bit more specific in that situation. Number 3 is null interpret. And again, this is a user-defined variable. But basically, what we're saying here is for another set of more specific situations, specifically Excel or text or even inline tables this would be relevant for. So basically, we want to say, hey, which values or characters should be regarded as null, right? So, okay, what does that mean? Well, basically, we could say, and let me just say, here we go. So we could say, hey, if there's just a space here, interpret that as a null value. Or we have over here, basically, there is no value showing up here. Now, what does that mean? If you see nothing in a cell in Excel, right? Is it null? Yes or no? Well, just a little heads up. Sometimes, and you may have come across this before, with a text string, there's a little tricky part here. Actually, Word is not the best example of this. It's giving me straight quotes. Ignore or smart quotes. Ignore that for a minute. Make sure that, imagine if they're straight quotes. My point is this. That is a text string. That's my name, 4 characters. The length of that text string is 4 characters. Right? If I use that, that's still a valid text string. That has a length of 1. And that right there, yep, that is a valid text string as well. That has a length of 0. Now the point here is sometimes you want to regard that as a null value, and other times you want to regard that as an actual answer. So if somebody says, what's your middle name? Well, what if you don't have one? I want to acknowledge the question. Okay? So sometimes you can just say double quote, and that would do the trick as an example. So again, we're just giving us more flexibility in terms of how to trap for that situation.
I have a question about here, that, actually. If there is like a 0 before, let's say, mark, right? So you have like a space mark, and you would like that to be included as, your data. But since you have a space in the front, would that actually matter? Sometimes in tables that would matter. So you have to get rid of any spaces or maybe trim the data before it goes in.
Yeah, I was going to say, most of the time it's not a problem with that being there. Most of the time you want it to not be there. So there is a function called trim, and at least in Excel, I forget. I think this is in Qliksense too. There's L trim and R trim. So meaning trim off any. Let me see. This would trim off this and return a 4 character text string. Right now, this has 5, right? There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would return just mark, right? And same thing for R. If I do trim, that's going to get rid of any preceding as well as trailing. But that's generally what you would use there.
Okay, gotcha.
Pretty good. Okay, good one. Okay, now the fourth one here is null as value, and this is considered to be a statement. So for this one, we're going to specify for which fields should a null be converted to a value. So for instance, we don't have to just say across the board everything gets converted to be a value. Rather, we could say specifically for this field, whoops, I messed myself up there. For this field and for this field, that's it, just those two, right? If we have a null value, then make it, convert it to this text string, none found or unknown or, whatever you want to put in it. That's pretty cool. That gives you a lot of control and it's easy to use, which I like. That leaves us with the fifth one here, which isn't really a prescription so much as a diagnosis. So null count is a script function, and it just basically allows us to count how many null values we have in a particular field, right? Why would we care? Maybe in cleaning up the data you get from another data source. We were promised that the data was clean, right? I did a count and I'm coming up with like 50% of the values are null, right? So maybe you could get some money back for, I don't know, like a mailing list or something like that. So that would be an example of why you would be interested in that. I think that's a nice one to know about too. Now, the point is I'm not doing anything weird. This is all coming right out of your book. So I think that's certainly a good one to know about. I'll hold up there for a moment. Anybody, any questions there at all? All right, just a couple other things here. In your book on page 158, they talk about bookmarks. Bookmarks are really useful, especially if you have